Hello, my name is Dr. Pamela, and this is The Joy Whisperer, where we explore the science and the practice of joy as a catalyst for our relationships, our resistance, our resilience, and our restoration. You may notice that we are in a very new location, and we are going to be bringing fresh new locations to you over the next few shows, so definitely stay tuned and get ready for a new look with new voices, a new setting, and new interviews. So I'm looking forward to this great new era that we're moving into. Today's show, we are going to look at the dark side of joy. And a lot of times we only think about joy for the good feelings that it brings us. And believe it or not, even the dark side of joy brings us good feelings. But the question is whether or not those good feelings are rooted in a place of health and well-being or a place of negativity, resentment, loathing. So we're going to look at that from three different perspectives. So the three truths for this week, number one is that there are indeed positive and negative forms of joy. So we're going to look at what those are and how we can recognize them. Number two, gaslighting is rooted in a form of toxic joy. So of course we're going to be talking about toxic joy, and we're going to be talking about gaslighting, which is that idea that if somebody is feeling neglected, abused, feeling not heard, and they express that, the person who gaslights them will say, your feelings are invalid, you're overreacting. That is a form of toxic joy because of the joy that people get out of that. And number three is we grow when we listen. And listening is essential, and we're going to talk about the different types of listening that lead to our growth. Grab a pen and let the joy whispering begin. Today's theory to live by is Perry's theory of ethical and intellectual development. Now, the thing that makes this theory so incredibly applicable to what we see going on with dialogue today is that it takes us from a place of looking at things from our perspective only and growing to a place of understanding that there are indeed multiple perspectives that have value. So Perry's theory looks at three particular stages of intellectual development. And the first stage begins with dualism. And dualism is the idea that there is right or wrong, good or bad, black and white, and there is nothing in between. So my perspective, of course, is the correct perspective because it is what has been taught to me by the authority figures in my life, my parents, my pastor, my teachers. And that is where the understanding stops because I don't ask questions. I accept it as it is because that is how it came to me. And the moment that I start to be confronted with other points of view, I either land or stick to my guns and stay with what I believe in, or I begin to ask questions and investigate a little further. When we start to ask questions, that brings us into the second phase, which is that of multiplicity. It means that I am willing to hear that there are probably other perspectives out there. Whether or not I'm ready to understand and listen to them, I understand that there are different points of view out there. And what that does is it puts me in a place of what's called cognitive dissonance, which means, wait a minute, that's very different from what I've been told. I don't know what to make of this. So we can either advance by asking questions and learning more and getting to know that perspective, or we can remain in our dualistic multiplicity perspective. Relativism says that I have a point of view and you have a point of view, and one is not necessarily better or more valid than the other, and that I can respect where we're coming from both perspectives. One of the things that we see in society with our politicians, our leaders, our debates around religious beliefs is that we don't necessarily move to a place of relativism, and we stay in a dualistic perspective, which we had as children. So we still see adults running the nation, running the country, running different corporations who are still very much set in a dualistic standpoint. So if we can move to relativism, we will hear each other better, we'll be more intellectual, and we'll be more likely to move forward into change.
It's time to tag a friend in this conversation. Unhealthy joy for me is everything versus me, allowing everything to win, not putting myself first, and people pleasing. Healthy joy is allowing me to self-love, self-appreciate, to grow, to live, to actually experience life.
Truth number one, there are positive and negative forms of joy. And in looking at these positive and negative forms, I have developed two different larger categories around what this may look like. So one is progressive joy, and the other is regressive joy. And so if we look at these two, we can kind of see where the root of the joy is. What's fueling this? Is it something that is based on well-being and positivity, or is it based on more negative feelings? Really is focused on, it promotes our well-being. And it can include two different elements, which is flourishing joy and compassionate joy. Now, the flourishing joy is the joy that is really about our well-being specifically. It's more inward focused. What are the things that need to happen in order for us to feel well, for us to have the energy that we need to push through difficult times, for us to rejoice in our wins and the beautiful things that happen in life? That's the flourishing joy. But when we turn that progressive joy, that positive joy outward, then we are doing what's called compassionate joy. And I call it compassionate joy because we are now looking at the experiences of other people, and we are rejoicing in those experiences. We are having compassion for those people's experiences. And so this is another form of progressive joy, both focused on wellness, one focused on our own internal wellness, and the second focused on the wellness of others. Now, when we look at regressive joy is actually the type of joy that hinders our well-being. And it really is rooted in a place of negativity. And one is toxic joy. And we've heard a lot of toxic this and that thrown around, but it is a really great fit for the idea here, for what we're talking about in terms of toxic joy. And then the second one is actually malicious joy. So in the same sense, one focuses on the self and what's going on the inside of ourselves, and the other focuses on what's going on with other people. So the toxic joy is the type of joy that is negatively and inwardly focused. And so I may have, how can you possibly have a negative form of joy towards yourself? So I may enjoy some sort of toxic behavior. Maybe I am addicted to something, a substance that doesn't necessarily serve me well. Now, there are certain things that you can indulge in that feel good, that don't necessarily serve you well, and you can do that in small doses. But when it gets to a point where you are out of control and you no longer have a sense of stability within your life because you are addicted to these behaviors or these substances, we can talk about drugs, we can talk about indiscriminate sex, we can talk about a lot of different damaging behaviors that seem to bring us joy, but are actually quite toxic. So that's what I mean by toxic joy. And then the malicious joy is the type of joy that you get from other people's pain. Now, there is a German word for this, and if I pronounce it correctly, it's Schadenfreude. And the idea is that it is literally the translation for joy in somebody else's pain. So what I've taken is that term and looked at, how about we look at this from the lens of a malicious joy? Because what that means is that I may be a part of creating the pain in that person's life. I may have some resentment towards somebody. I may be committed to some sort of revenge and making sure that they do not succeed. And as I see them fail or not progress or struggle, there is a level of joy that I might feel in that experience. That is what I'm calling malicious joy. And so the question remains, is this indeed joy? Are these regressive forms of joy actually joy? They actually are. But they're not the kind of joy that feeds into our wellness or the wellness of others. The progressive joy is the kind of joy that feeds into our wellness and the wellness of others. And we need to recognize when we are engaging in progressive versus regressive joy. So keep that in mind.
More of the Joy Whisperer coming up.
Malicious joy is a thing. Now, I know we don't like to think about this a lot, but if we just look at the course of humanity and all of the cases throughout history in which people have actually found joy in creating pain and hardship in other people. Look at world leaders who have incited war on innocent people. Look at all of the different forms of imprisonment that have been done unjustly. Look at the ways that people have been oppressed socially, economically, financially, educationally, and the level of joy that people actually get when they succeed in these endeavors. And a lot of it has to do with feeling threatened and not wanting to lose their own sense of power. And so in doing that, they try to render other people powerless. And so it is important for us to understand that malicious joy, it doesn't always just happen in the extreme. It also happens in everyday situations. It happens in marriages. It happens when a couple is really just determined to one up the other in conversation, in behavior, in actions, when they want to prove something to each other. We see this happen in the workplace, where a colleague is at odds with another and they are competing with the other. And if the other person fails, they're finding joy in that. And from a malicious standpoint, actually being the catalyst for that person's demise, that person's failure, is a form of malicious joy. So we see this happen all the time. And we get a sense of satisfaction if we are engaging in malicious joy from these types of behaviors. And we may not pay attention to it because we're not oppressing other countries, we're not inciting war, we are just engaging with other people in ways that are actually rooted in the negative. So I want you to think about that.
Hi, I'm Dr. Melissa Hankins. I'm an adult psychiatrist, emotional freedom techniques practitioner, and coach for physicians and high performers. When considering this concept of malicious joy, as Dr. Pamela Larde describes it, this joy that stems from and thrives in the pain, the harm, or the hurt of others, I would argue that in most instances where we might see that, it is typically coming from a place of deep emotional wounding or childhood trauma, and as such is a learned response. It's almost a survival response that's based in needing or seeking a sense of fulfilling the needs of safety, security, feeling loved. Those are real needs that we have as children. And when we don't receive that from our caregivers, our parents, that there will be a way of fulfilling that need as children, because we adapt to our environment, and we find the ways, we adapt our behaviors to get those needs met. And if the behavior then became one in which, oh, okay, I receive love if I am seen as more valuable than someone else. I receive love and I feel safe if someone, in terms of competition, if I'm better than that person, or I get the accolades, I'm seen as perfect, I have value in the eyes of my caregiver, then that person is going to love me, protect me, and keep me safe. So that then translates into adult behaviors where this sense of malicious joy, because we can't feel joy or pleasure, well, we could feel pleasure, but we can't feel joy if we are feeling unsafe or we're not feeling loved. And so as adults, we are continuing these behaviors unless we become aware of them and shift them. So this malicious joy is an externally driven and externally derived uh, sense of joy, and therefore is not an authentic, in my opinion, joy, because authentic joy is internally sourced, internally driven, and is not dependent upon others or your environment. It is something that is a deep knowing, a very felt sense, and something that is experienced in a whole body way. It is a full expression of joy, whereas malicious joy is a false expression or a facade of joy at best. And it's fleeting, because it will always only come from sourcing your joy externally.
There is power in joy, and this week's Power Gear is the release of Letters to the Brokenhearted, my book, in Audible. So it is now an audio book that you can listen to. So for those of you who have been waiting out getting the Audible book, the audio book, please go check it out on audible.com. So if you're going to go on a long road trip or you're cleaning the house and you want to have something great to listen to, something that can inspire you, something that can heal some of the hurts, check out Letters to the Brokenhearted on Audible.
It's time to tag a friend in this conversation.
What brings me joy? Joy, not to sound cliche-ish, but waking up in the morning with nothing hurting, being able to see the promise of a new day, dawn, seeing the sunset, long walks on cool days, seeing the smile on people's faces when they receive good news, being the bearer of good news, success, and what that means, everybody's different, but seeing people's success, just happiness.
Welcome back to the Joy Whisperer. So just to dive a little bit more into this idea of toxic joy, I want to bring forth gaslighting. Now we hear the term all the time, and sometimes probably overused. There's a lot of terms out there that people are sort of becoming numb to because they feel like they hear it too much. But I want to make sure we understand what gaslighting is. What it really is, this idea that I am not going to honor whatever feelings of hurt that you may have. So if somebody comes to you and says that, something that you said really hurt my feelings, and your response is, you're overreacting, I didn't mean it that way, it was just a joke. Instead of drawing closer and saying, tell me more. If we're talking about racism and we're saying that Black lives matter, and some says all lives matter. It's not because they truly believe that all lives matter. They are saying this as a way to discount our need to be seen and to be heard as we say that Black lives matter. And so that is a form of gaslighting. That's a form of saying what you believe doesn't matter, your hurt doesn't matter. And so a lot of people actually get joy out of this, kind of behavior, and being able to say that, no, I made them feel small because what they said didn't matter to me. Better ways to respond to this might be about getting curious, asking about the hurt, being willing to listen, and putting your own feelings aside, your defensive feelings aside, to hear what they have to say. Now, I'm going to have a conversation with Coach Heather Thompson, and we're going to dive into this idea of what it means to leave an impressionable imprint. Now, we've heard the term digital imprint and the footprints that we leave, in the social media world, in the digital world. But what does it mean to leave more of a qualitative imprint on other people with the platforms that we have, with our social media accounts in which we engage with a wide audience? Some of us have larger audiences than others, but we all have the opportunity to leave an impression on other people. Hello there, Coach Heather Thompson.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. I'm very excited about this topic.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you joined me. I often see your posts that are really about challenging people to live their lives with integrity, honesty, and I just truly appreciate the way that you have, sort of influenced your own, circle of people, that surround you. And
Thank you.
it often doesn't matter how many people, some of us may have 150 people on our social media, and others may have 600,000, and so either way we're making an impression. But before we dive into this conversation, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what your focus is as a coach?
I am a clarity life coach, an author, and writer, and a speaker as well. My audience is primarily women of color who are faith based, who genuinely want to live their best lives, but they're determined to do that without compromising their authenticity or their integrity. And I love the circle that I have around me, encouraging me to do that. And even the women and men as well, who are just reaching out and letting me know that I'm helping them even with the things that I question, is this making an impact? So that's why I'm so excited about what we're going to talk about today, and why I really love what I do.
I love it. Is what you're doing making an impact? And unfortunately, there are people who do indeed make an impact, but it's not necessarily in a way that's life giving. And as we've seen, there have been several influential people, whether they are social media influencers or they are world leaders or local politicians, who have really used their platforms to cause pain and harm upon other people. It's so easy to do that these days.
I think people don't realize just how hurt they are, and they're bringing that to social media. There are some people who would probably question, well, why do you say they're hurt? If I speak to you, and every time I speak to you, it's coming from a place of, well, I'm just being honest. I'm just being brutally honest. The thing about honesty is that it's always brutal, because the truth has a way of cutting us as well as healing us. But if I have to take a verbal sword and stab you with what I'm saying, if I have to take a picture and put it up just so that I'm, saying, oh, look at this person, look at that. I don't want to use my platform. I don't want other people to use their platform to mock. What is the point? Many people feel bad enough as it is. And then on top of that, don't want to seek help for it all the time, because there's issues of pride or issues of, well, this is just how things are. This isn't a big deal. Your mentality is a huge deal. And the idea of bringing your vitriol, really, because there's just too much of it being spewed these days, onto social media, and saying just because you have a certain amount of money, you have a certain amount of followers, that it's okay, that it's permissible because your net worth is really the biggest part of your influence. That to me is just sad, and sometimes it gets sick. So I think we really need to think about, why are we following people that give us that kind of impression, that have that kind of influence over us. And we also want to make sure that what we're doing is not causing more harm than good. There's enough harm in the world. All you have to do is turn on the news and figure that out very quickly.
Oh yeah.
So and lately it just seems absolutely overwhelming. And as a whole, I think people are becoming unfeeling, and they're becoming numb to that. So even bringing that to their attention is just like, well, what are you talking about? But I'm thankful for those who are still sensitive and who will still receive the message that, you know what, there's better ways for me to be out here in this digital world. Make sure that I'm bringing my authentic self to these various platforms, because it's not worth trying to uphold the lie.
I love what you said. And there's a couple of things that you said in the beginning that really resonate. This whole idea of people coming to social media and approaching their platforms from a place of hurt, really. And it's something that, often we don't want to recognize. I use the phrase that, you're bleeding all over everyone. And people don't really want to recognize that, but that's indeed what's happening. And then what I'm also seeing is that people are clinging to that hurt because it's familiar to them. And so it's that whole idea of trauma bonding, and so I want the brutal honesty. I want the thing that hurts because that makes me feel something. And the only way that I'll take action is if I feel what I'm accustomed to, not if I feel joy. or if I feel, because that's scary. How long is that going to last? And so I really appreciate that perspective, because there is a lot of this sort of attachment based on, trauma, for one another. So one of my questions for you also is, how do we recognize that a form of honesty is harmful? This whole idea of brutal honesty. I'm just telling you, how do you know that, this probably isn't the most healthy type of delivery for me to be taking in on a regular basis?
I think that's a great question. I think one of the ways for you to tell, and this requires, I guess, a bit of introspection, a little bit of inner work, is whether or not when you're speaking to someone, if you know you're speaking to them brutally, are they able to come back to you for any sort of follow-up? Are they able to continue, the people that you speak to, the people that you interact with, whether it's on a very personal level or almost a surface level, are they able to say anything else to you? If you can see their face when they're talking to you, can you just tell that you created a damaging moment within them? Can you tell that you've knocked them down without helping them be able to stand up? When people are coming to you for the truth, they're coming to you with their vulnerability. And vulnerability requires exposure on a very personal level that we just don't like anymore, because think about it, we can filter our faces for people who don't even know us when we post on social media. So if someone's giving you raw conversation and you're meeting them with verbal switchblades, why? And you can easily tell that you're doing this type of thing, maybe more frequently or easily, I should say, than you might have in the past. Pay attention to your entertainment. Pay attention, for example, in our society now, it has become so normal for for you to just snap back, or someone to just come back at someone, a clap back, as we like to say
Yes.
now.
Mhm.
And it's applauded. Like, oh yes, you just hit them where it hurt. Yes, girl, you did that. But did you really? Yeah, you did that. But is it something worth applauding? Is
Yeah.
it something worth celebrating? We seem to have these verbal parades for people who decide to annihilate others with their words. And that it's if you want that, go to a stage play. Don't let that be your conversation. That's
Yeah.
We are using other people's damage and their willingness to damage others as entertainment. That to me is frightening.
It's interesting because I see this when you look at Will and Jada, for example, and the level of, I know, and the level of satisfaction people get from any sort of demise that Jada may experience. And the level of, and so you're absolutely on point when you're saying this has become sort of the tone of our society. If those people that we have all been told we're not supposed to like, have a diminishing moment or a downfall of some sort, then it's celebrated in such a toxic way. And, what is going on there?
I think that's a multi-layered answer, and I think that depending on who you ask, they're gonna say something different. I think that there are, uh, within our communities, I think there are people who just don't even understand, I am so unhappy that when I see someone else who is doing better than me, whether it's financially, relationally, physically, in terms of their health, whatever, if I don't think they should have what they have, then when they fall, it's like, yes, you're a little more average, just like me. Your lifestyle it can be fodder for my conversation. I haven't had contact with the friends I like to have contact with or at work, so I can't have that water cooler time. I don't have the lounge or the club or the whatever to visit people with. So being able to talk with others online, being able to come up with something that I can craft, where all these wordsmiths and the real IG is internet gangsters these days. That's how I feel about it. These, half thugs when it comes to the keyboards, because you can say whatever you want. So, and hide behind that. I think that we find comfort in other people's discomfort or even their rage or their downfall, because we just don't want to admit how unhappy we are. And that for me is, I know I've said it already, but it's frightening. And we see it all the time in real life when people get married and there's someone standing there who's like, this should be my opportunity, blah, blah, blah. Or when someone gets a new job, gets to go back to school, whatever, there's this criticism corner rather than a hallelujah corner. And it's just like, well, she could have done this differently. He didn't have to do this like this. Well, nobody asked you. And how about I just ask you, how are you? And if the answer is not good, what do you want to do to fix that? Can I help you? It's just become all too much. It really has.
Yeah, it really has. Let's talk a little bit about how we use our platforms in ways that create lasting legacies. So recently, there a relationship expert passed away who used his platform to really just and a lot of opinions of women and supportive men in ways that diminished women for how they looked, for how valuable they were or were not. He passed away. The headlines were more about his controversy than the lasting impression that he made through his platform in a way that was positive and productive. Now, of course, positive and productive can be looked at in a number of different ways, and there are people that will argue that his indeed was. However, when your passing is covered with so much controversy, and we can probably say that the same thing would happen with other, leaders out there, other politicians, world leaders that are causing harm on other people. They leave a legacy that says that person caused pain and harm on other people. And if that's something that you're okay with because I was brutally honest, then I would encourage you to examine yourself personally. But I am curious to know, what does it mean to leave an impression on people that's actually transformative and positive? And how can one come to the point of doing that when the negative stuff gets so much publicity, so much likes, so much attention? And I've had friends who are trying to build their platform say, yeah, but nobody's listening to the stuff with integrity. That's boring to them. I have to stir things up a bit.
Thinking of what you're talking about, every conversation that we have with someone, every kind gesture, every time that you took, not in a detrimental way, but you took time away to say, let me help this person, and coming from a genuine place, not doing it begrudgingly, that is writing your legacy. We, every single day, are writing the sentences, the pages, the chapters of our book that will be told when this life is over. And I think that so much of what we do and I'm speaking to the masses. I'm not speaking just to those who are like, well, how would I become more seen? All of us, when we do things from a place of genuineness, we do them from a place of how can I actually give to this space rather than take away and take glory out of it for me. When you're doing that, you have the opportunity to create healing. I think too many people are in a place where they're using their power in a way that creates an influence. And it has what I call a Killmonger effect. For those who are familiar with Eric Killmonger from Black Panther, who in the movie was played by Michael B. Jordan. People were very impressed by Killmonger after the film was over. And I'll get back to the positive, I promise. They were impressed by Killmonger because, one, you found out he was very educated. You found out that he had, traveled the world. He was deeply in pursuit of his goals. And also, he said that he was very committed to his people. And people loved the quote at the end about bury me in the ocean with my ancestors, et cetera. They loved what he had to say, but they were overlooking what he was killing, what he was doing in order to get there. If you have to leave a trail of people in your wake, now we're talking verbally speaking, of course, versus literally. If you have to leave a trail of people in your wake who've been damaged by what you've done and said and even thought and let out loud, that is not it. And sometimes we're so impressed by stature that we forget, what about caring anymore? What about the fact that this person is a mother, a father, raising our children, the conversations that we have with friends, everything? When we focus more on, you know what? I have an opportunity to build you up. and what I do to build you up can actually have a generational effect, that to me is impactful.
More of the Joy Whisperer coming up. It's time to tag a friend in this conversation.
So the question has been given to me, how do I express my joy? And being a photographer, I express my joy through my lens. When I see an amazing subject, when I see an amazing picture and we capture those subjects or pictures, and then we present it to the client, and then they smile. Some of them even cry. That's joy to me. Joy to me.
This week's Whisper in My Ear. Is it wrong to celebrate the fall of someone who has caused pain on someone else? That's a very interesting question, because we have all had bosses or bullies or world leaders or public figures who have made it their mission to create misery in the lives of others. And when they fall, they are essentially creating relief for those people that they oppressed. So, first and foremost, where is that joy and that celebration rooted? Is it coming from a place that says, yes, I wanted that person who created suffering in other places and other people to suffer themselves? If that's where it's coming from, then that is really kind of going in the direction of a regressive type of joy. It really is about the spirit of the celebration and where it's coming from, and where it's directed. And so thinking about those things, it's so important for us to examine ourselves, to consider the source of the emotion. Now, it is perfectly okay, in my opinion, to have emotions of relief, to have emotions that are absolutely authentic to what you're feeling. If there was a level of pain that you directly experienced from the fall of that particular leader, you absolutely should have a space to express that. But when it starts getting into the realm of celebrating their pain and celebrating their demise and the things that bring them down, then we take a risk, and it's a slippery slope, but we take a risk of reveling in somebody else's pain and giving into that regressive joy. This does not contribute to well-being. Try to think of ways to allow that joy that you experience to come from a place of compassion.
If I love you, I can't lie to you.
Of course you can lie to me, and you will. If you love me and you're going off with Maddie someplace, you're lying to me. Because what the hell do I care about the truth? I care if you're there. What Billie Holiday say, hush now, don't explain.
All right, I accept that.
Of course you'll lie to me. And I don't even want to care. What does the truth matter? And why are you going to be truthful with me when you lie to everybody else? You lied when you smiled at down the job, right? Lie to me, smile. Treat me the same way you would treat him.
I can't treat you the way I treat him.
You must. Because I've caught the frowns and the anger. He's happy with you. Of course he doesn't know you're unhappy. You grin at him all day long. You come home and I catch hell because I love you. I get least of you. I get the very minimum. And I'm saying, fake it with me. Is that too much of the black woman to ask of the black man? For 10 years, so that we can get a child on his feet that says, yeah, father smiled at mother. He talked to me about school today. Who cares that you can read or can't read? Most Americans can't read. Most people can't read. They look at the pictures.
Baby, I know what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying, and I don't disagree. But no, I'm going to be honest and think about it really. I'm not so sure that is a human possibility. If I have to smile all day, and the cat on the job, the foreman, you don't understand why I'm smiling.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I want to smile, I'm smiling because that baby needs new shoes. I can't give a performance all day on the job and come home and give a performance all night in the house.
Okay, so one of the performances will stop.
Yes. So you say, and okay, I might be willing to go with it, but who's going to pay the rent?
You're back to that again. The rent will get paid.
Look, baby, I'm willing to play it your way, but you have to see my point of view.
I see your point of view. But the rent will have to get paid.
The price of the rent is my smile.
No. I don't want you prostituting yourself. I demand.
I don't want you prostituting yourself either. One of us has got to work.
You will work it out because you are intelligent enough and you are sensitive enough. You are a man enough to work out a new system because we started off with Everybody's Protest Novel and we're back there again. As long as the assumptions are the same, nothing will change.
An amazing experience. It was so much more than I expected. I didn't quite know what I was getting into when I signed up for this. Was it the right program for me? Was I going to get what I needed out of it? I got what I needed and more. For anyone considering becoming a coach, I highly recommend this program.
This weekend intensive was so awesome.
It allows structure and discipline, and it's an efficient process. And most importantly, you have instructors that bring real life experiences that bring the content to life.
I got practice. I'm not afraid to walk out and coach somebody right now. I also got clients and booked clients from those discussions. I also booked a speaking engagement from this weekend. This was way more than I could have imagined.
Were just phenomenal. You know, I don't really think I could have asked for much more.
In this world of virtual communication, virtual interaction, social media, conference calling, it has really dwindled away or chipped away at our listening skills. And so when we think about it, one of the most profound ways that we build listening skills is by asking questions. And our question asking skills are pretty bad. We don't ask questions because we are busy or we are used to the time being abbreviated. So for example, when we are on a Zoom call, and this might be work related, sometimes we don't even have our cameras on. And if we do have our cameras on, that human to human interaction is just profoundly different than it would be face to face. And what we're seeing is the decline in listening skills and the decline in communication as a result. So if you think about all of the different ways that we communicate virtually and how we integrate genuine question asking in that process, we might identify that, we really don't do that the way we used to. So even when we do ask questions, the answers tend to be just sort of these mechanical, politically correct answers. How are you doing? I'm good. How are you? I'm good. Okay, let's get to business. So now we have just minimized the possibility of creating a human connection because our priority has been, how do we get this quick pleasantry out the way so that we can engage in whatever else we're supposed to be doing? So if you think about it, how do you give genuine answers when people ask how you're doing? If you're not truly doing great, it's okay to say, I've had better days. And if we are really connecting with each other, the person may dig a little bit deeper and say, oh, wow, I'm sorry to hear that. How's the day going? And it gives you an opportunity to engage a bit further. And so this is what I am challenging you all to do throughout the next week, is not just settle for, I'm fine, when somebody asks how you're doing. And if you ask how somebody else is doing, be willing to dig a little bit deeper. So if they say, I'm good, ask, well, are you really good? I mean, is that your real answer or is that your politically correct answer? And be willing to give yourself a few minutes to answer that question. This week's gift to myself is a return to the gym. So after 2 years off, 2 solid years off from the gym, I decided to venture my way back there. Now, I've been exercising at home. I even bought a treadmill. I'd been walking, doing jumping jacks, jump roping, all of that. But lately, my life has been a bit hectic, and I've found that finding the motivation to do those solo types of exercises have been a bit more challenging lately. So I've decided to find my motivation by doing some group workouts. So I have joined 2 classes, yoga and cycling, and I do this every other day. So one day is yoga, the next day is cycling, and I just alternate days, and it has been phenomenal for my mindset, my well-being, my body, and I am loving the return to the gym. So while I was doing really good by myself, I am absolutely seeing the value of going to the gym, of working out with other people, of being a part of a solid fitness community. So that is my gift to myself, and I encourage you, if there is a way to connect with a fitness community, it doesn't even have to be a gym. It could be a park where people meet up and do yoga, or it could be a running group. Whatever it is, finding the motivation with other people can be a real key to your fitness success. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of The Joy Whisperer. Join us every Thursday from 12 to 1 on the Roku channel. Also join me on my social media pages on LinkedIn and Instagram at Whispering Joy. And remember, joy is the catalyst for our resistance, our resilience, our restoration, and our relationships.
Come on SSN TV, television, all the way up.